My name is John, and I am a book illustrator. My days are spent quietly and in solitude, hunched over my drawing table, meticulously bringing to life the words of authors through my art. My small home studio is a sanctuary of silence and creativity, far removed from the bustle of the outside world. I have always cherished this seclusion, finding solace in the gentle scratch of pencil on paper and the rustle of pages turning. One evening, as I worked late into the night, my concentration was disrupted by the sound of a moving van outside. I glanced out the window and saw a flurry of activity at the house next door. A new neighbor was moving in. She was a striking woman, her beauty apparent even from a distance. Her name, as I would later learn, was Samantha. For the first few days, I paid her little attention. My work demanded focus, and I had grown accustomed to the quiet routine of my life. But one night, as I lay in bed, a strange sound pierced the silent E of my home. At first, I thought it was a dream, but as the moans of happiness grew louder, I realized they were real. Curiosity got the better of me. I rose from my bed and moved to the window, peering out through the thin curtains that offered a view into Samantha's bedroom. The scene before me was both shocking and mesmerizing. Samantha was there, bathed in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, making passionate love to a man. Her body moved with a fluid grace, her back arched in ecstasy as she rode him. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, catching the light and creating a halo effect around her head. Her skin glistened with a fine sheen of sweat, highlighting every curve and contour of her body. The man beneath her gripped her hips, guiding her movements with a hunger that matched her own. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Each moan, each gasp, each movement was a symphony of sensuality that ignited a fire within me. My breath quickened, and I felt a primal urge rising. The sight of them, so raw and unfiltered, was too much to bear. My hand found its way to my own body, and I began to touch myself, unable to resist the magnetic pull of the scene unfolding before me. The intensity of my arousal built rapidly, fueled by the sounds and sights of their lovemaking. I matched their rhythm, my body mirroring their passion as I stroked myself faster and faster. It was as though I was there with them, part of their intimate dance. The pleasure swelled within me, reaching a crescendo that sent waves of ecstasy crashing through me. I climaxed with a force that left me trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. As I lay back on my bed, spent and breathless, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. What had I done? But the memory of the night's events lingered, a tantalizing reminder of the connection I had felt, however fleeting and voyeuristic it had been. The next morning, I was roused from sleep by the sound of my doorbell. My heart skipped a beat as I wondered who it could be. I quickly threw on some clothes and hurried downstairs. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the sight of Samantha standing on my doorstep, her eyes sparkling with curiosity and a hint of mischief.
"Good morning,"
she said, her voice as enchanting as her appearance.
"I'm Samantha, your new neighbor. I thought I'd come over and introduce myself."
I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing heart. "Good morning, Samantha. I'm John. It's nice to meet you." Her gaze lingered on me, and I couldn't help but wonder if she knew about last night, if she had somehow sensed my presence, my voyeuristic intrusion. But she gave no indication, her smile warm and inviting. "Samantha says the plumbing in her house is broken. She asked me if I could fix it, so I said yes." I followed Samantha to her house. She walked with a confident grace, her hips swaying slightly with each step. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of excitement and nerves as I clutched my toolbox, ready to fix her broken plumbing. As I stepped inside her home, I was immediately struck by the romantic and seductive decor. Soft lighting, plush furnishings, and a faint scent of jasmine created an atmosphere that was both inviting and intoxicating. I couldn't help but be reminded of the passionate scene I had witnessed the night before.
"This way,"
Samantha said, leading me to the kitchen where the problem lay. She bent down to show me the broken pipe under the sink, and my breath caught in my throat. Her jeans hugged her curves perfectly, her round, firm ass drawing my eyes like a magnet. I could barely focus on the task at hand, my mind wandering to forbidden fantasies. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself as I knelt beside her and opened my toolbox. The sight and sound of her from last night were still vivid in my mind, a tantalizing memory that made it difficult to concentrate. As I began working on the pipe, Samantha leaned against the counter, watching me with a curious smile.
Did you hear any noise last night?
She asked, her tone casual but her eyes probing. I froze for a moment, my hands fumbling with the wrench. My crotch bulged slightly at the memory, and I felt a flush of embarrassment. No, not really, I stammered, trying to sound nonchalant. I was pretty focused on my work. She nodded, looking relieved.
I like to play loud music sometimes. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't disturbing you.
I forced a smile, my heart racing. Nope, didn't hear a thing. It didn't take long to fix the pipe, though my hands shook slightly from the proximity to her and the memories that haunted me. When I finished, Samantha clapped her hands together in delight.
You're very talented,
she said, her eyes sparkling with genuine admiration. I felt a blush creep up my neck. It's just a simple repair, I mumbled, feeling awkward under her gaze. As I gathered my tools, I couldn't help but ask, why didn't you let your boyfriend fix it? She looked at me with a surprised expression.
I don't have a boyfriend.
I was taken aback, my mind flashing back to the sight of her with the man last night. Oh, I just thought. She laughed softly, a melodic sound that sent a shiver down my spine.
No, that was just a friend.
She hesitated for a moment before continuing.
I wanted to thank you for your help. I made some cookies. Would you like some?
In my head, I imagined all sorts of things she could offer as a reward, but reality brought me back to earth with the sweet aroma of freshly baked cookies. I'd love some, I replied, smiling. She handed me a plate of warm cookies, their aroma filling the room.
Thank you again, John.
I returned to my house, feeling a strange mixture of elation and confusion. Her cookies were delicious, each bite a reminder of her sweetness and the peculiar charm she held. As I worked on my latest illustration, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my studio. Night fell, and as I painted, I heard her moans again. My heart skipped a beat as I moved to the window, drawn by the sound. This time I saw two men entering her room. They kissed each other passionately, and then Samantha joined them, her body moving with the same fervor I had seen before. The scene was electrifying. My body responded instinctively, hardening at the sight of their erotic dance. The three of them moved together with a raw, primal energy that left me breathless. I watched, unable to look away, my mind filled with wild fantasies. As I touched myself, I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever be fortunate enough to join Samantha in her passionate escapades. The thought of being with her, of experiencing the intensity of her desire firsthand, was almost too much to bear. My climax was intense, leaving me trembling and breathless once more. As I lay back, staring at the ceiling, I knew that my quiet, solitary life was forever changed. Samantha had awakened something within me, a longing that I could no longer ignore. Would I ever have the courage to tell her how I felt? To ask if there was a place for me in her world of passion and desire? Only time would tell. But for now, I could only dream and hope that one day, I might find the courage to reach out and grasp the life I so desperately craved. The next day, I was deep in my work when the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat when I opened the door and saw Samantha standing there. Her expression was a mix of frustration and urgency.
Hey, John. Is the electricity out in your house? Mine just went out, and my water heater isn't working.
No, everything's fine here. She sighed, clearly upset, and pulled out her phone to call a mechanic. As she spoke, she glanced at me, her eyes pleading.
Can I use your bathroom to take a shower? I promise I won't take long.
I hesitated for a moment, the memory of last night flashing in my mind, but then nodded. Of course, go ahead. Samantha gave me a grateful smile and headed to the bathroom. I tried to focus on my painting, but my mind kept drifting to her. I couldn't concentrate, the brush in my hand feeling foreign and awkward. A few minutes later, I heard her call out,
John, I forgot my towel outside. Can you bring it to me?
My hands trembled as I grabbed a towel and walked to the bathroom door.
It's not locked, you can come in.
I pushed the door open and froze. Samantha stood there, completely naked, water cascading down her flawless skin. Her body was a work of art, every curve and contour perfect. My eyes traced the lines of her figure, my breath catching in my throat. She smiled, a knowing look in her eyes as she took the towel from me and began to dry herself off.
You're such a gentleman,
she said, her voice soft and teasing. I stood there, unable to move or speak, as she finished drying herself and wrapped the towel around her body. She walked past me and into the living room, heading straight for the window that overlooked her house. She looked out the window, then turned to me with a sly smile.
You must have a great view from here. I bet you can see everything that happens in my bedroom.
I sleep early. I don't see anything at all.
Sure, John. Whatever you say.
Just then, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and said,
The electrician's here. I need to go check on my house.
She walked to the door, pausing for a moment to look back at me.
Thanks for letting me use your shower. I'll see you around.
As the door closed behind her, I sank into a chair, my mind racing. What was I going to do about Samantha? She was intoxicating, a constant temptation that I couldn't seem to escape. The hours crept by as I painted in my studio, the quiet of the night enveloping me. My focus wavered, a strange sense of unease gnawing at the edges of my mind. Something was missing. Samantha's voice, her presence, the nightly soundtrack of her passion. It was absent. The silence was unsettling. Unable to resist the pull of curiosity, I rose from my chair and moved to the window, parting the curtains just enough to peer outside. My heart skipped a beat as I saw Samantha in her bedroom, alone, slowly taking off her shirt. Her movements were deliberate, sensual, as if she knew someone was watching, as if she knew I was watching. Couldn't look away. My hand instinctively moved to my crotch, my arousal growing with every passing second. But then, Samantha looked back at me, her eyes meeting mine through the glass. I froze, caught in the act, my heart pounding in my chest. Moments later, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Samantha standing there, her expression a mix of amusement and curiosity.
Do you secretly watch me every night?
My face burned with embarrassment, but I nodded. Yes, I do.
I thought so. You probably can't see everything clearly from the window, can you?
Before I could respond, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. With a slow, deliberate movement, she undressed, her clothes falling to the floor one by one until she stood before me, completely naked.
Tonight you can masturbate as much as you like, but you can't touch me.
I was shocked, my mind reeling from the strangeness of her request. But as she began to touch herself, her fingers moving with practiced ease, I couldn't help myself. The sight was too enticing, too overwhelming. My hands found their way to my cock, and I began to masturbate, my eyes locked on her every movement. The intensity of the moment consumed me. I matched her rhythm, my strokes becoming faster and more urgent as her own pleasure grew. Her moans filled the room, mingling with my own ragged breaths. The forbidden nature of the act only heightened my arousal, pushing me closer and closer to the edge. With a final, shuddering gasp, I climaxed, my orgasm leaving me trembling and breathless. Samantha watched, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. She dipped a finger into my cum, bringing it to her lips and tasting it with a wicked glint in her eyes.
Delicious,
she murmured, before picking up her clothes and dressing once more. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door, looking back at me with a mischievous smile.
Come see me tomorrow and bring your drawing equipment.
I watched her leave, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Desire, confusion, anticipation. They all swirled together, leaving me both exhilarated and apprehensive. What was Samantha planning? What did she want from me? The questions lingered as I cleaned up and tried to return to my work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new temptations. But one thing was certain. Samantha had awakened something in me that I could no longer ignore. The lines between art and reality, desire and restraint, were becoming increasingly blurred, and I was eager to see where this new path would lead. I gathered my drawing supplies and made my way to Samantha's house, a mix of anticipation and curiosity swirling in my mind. When she opened the door, she greeted me with a kind smile that sent a rush of warmth through my body.
"Come in,"
she said, leading me to the living room where a plush sofa awaited. She settled herself gracefully on the sofa and looked at me with an earnest expression.
"I want you to paint me nude, but I've never trusted any artist enough to pose for them. Until I met you."
I was taken aback by her admission but did my best to hide my surprise. Last night had indeed been a test, a way to gauge my intentions and perhaps my self-control. "I understand."
"For me to feel comfortable, I need you to be naked too. As a friend."
I hesitated only briefly before nodding and beginning to undress. She watched me, her eyes roaming appreciatively over my body.
"You're in better shape than I thought,"
she remarked, a hint of admiration in her voice. Once I was undressed, she began to disrobe as well, her movements slow and deliberate. Her figure, as perfect and timeless as the goddess Venus, left me momentarily breathless. I forced myself to focus, channeling my professional detachment as I picked up my brush. The act of painting calmed me, allowing me to see Samantha as a subject of art rather than a source of temptation. Her beauty translated onto the canvas, each stroke capturing her essence, though I couldn't quite capture the full reality of her allure. When I finished, she looked at the portrait and beamed.
"It's beautiful,"
she said, genuine admiration in her eyes. She reached out and took my hand, guiding it to her chest. Her skin was warm and soft beneath my touch, and I felt a surge of excitement as I gently squeezed.
"Show me all the skills you have,"
she whispered, her voice thick with desire. I pulled her into a heated kiss, our bodies pressing together in a frenzy of passion. Her lips were soft and insistent against mine, and when she sank to her knees and took me into her mouth, I almost lost control. She was incredibly skilled, her movements sending waves of pleasure through me. I had to stop her before I climaxed, pulling her up and guiding her onto the sofa. My hands roamed her body, finding the places that made her gasp and shiver. Slowly, I entered her, savoring every moment as we moved together, our rhythms syncing in perfect harmony. When we finished, I dressed quickly, still in a daze from the intensity of our encounter. As I was about to leave, the doorbell rang. Samantha's male friend, someone I had never seen before, stepped inside. He greeted me with a friendly smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched and judged.
"See you around,"
Samantha said as I left, her smile both warm and enigmatic. Back home, I couldn't resist looking out the window. I saw Samantha with the new guy, their bodies entwined in an intimate dance. She seemed to catch my eye and smiled, a look of triumph and satisfaction on her face as she showed off every move. I felt a pang of confusion and a deeper sense of unease. What was happening to me? Was I just another plaything for her amusement, a pawn in her game of seduction and control? The confusion gnawed at me, an incessant ache that I couldn't shake. The next day, driven by a need for clarity, I went to Samantha's house. She answered the door, her smile as alluring as ever. "Samantha," I began, my voice tinged with frustration. "Am I just your toy?" Her smile faltered for a moment before she regained her composure.
"You're a friend, John, just like my other friends."
I shook my head, unable to accept her answer. "I don't want to be like the many men who come to your house. I feel jealous, possessive even, and it's driving me crazy." I told her I wasn't interested in her anymore. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and amusement.
"Are you sure about that?"
Before I could respond, she walked towards me, her hand reaching down to rub my crotch. My mouth said, "I don't want you," but my body betrayed me, responding eagerly to her touch. She knelt down, her mouth enveloping me in a wave of pleasure. I tried to resist, but it was futile. She brought me to the brink and beyond, swallowing everything as she looked up at me with those intense eyes. "How can I escape from a demon like you?" I whispered more to myself than to her. Instead of distancing myself from her, I found myself drawn to Samantha more than ever. Every time she wanted me, I gave in. I wanted to refuse, to reclaim my sense of self, but her body, her touch was too intoxicating. I knew I had to do something to break free, but every time I tried to muster the strength to resist, I failed. One day, she came to my house, her intentions clear. "Not today," I said, trying to sound firm. She ignored my words and began to masturbate right next to me, her moans filling the room. I tensed up, trying to restrain myself. The sight of her in such raw pleasure was almost too much to bear. But somehow I succeeded. I didn't touch her. Samantha's expression shifted from seductive to angry, her eyes darkening. She looked almost demonic, a far cry from the beautiful woman I had fallen for. "Why don't you call one of your many men?" I snapped, my frustration boiling over. Her eyes filled with tears.
"Because I only want you, John. I fell in love with you from the beginning. Everything I've done was to make you mine."
Her confession stunned me. The layers of her actions began to make sense, but it only added to my confusion. "Prove it," I said, the words escaping before I could think them through. "Move in with me." She looked at me, her expression a mix of hope and fear.
"Are you serious?"
"Yes, if you really want me, move in with me," Samantha agreed, and within days she was living in my house. Samantha moved into my house as promised, and I watched with a mix of relief and curiosity as she cut off contact with all her other men. It was a stark change, one that signaled her commitment to me, but it also made me uneasy. Her words echoed in my mind. She'd do anything for my dick. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. So when she expressed her desire, I didn't hesitate. I took off my pants, and she eagerly took me in her hands, her touch electric with longing.
"You can do anything you want with me,"
she whispered, her voice dripping with need. Her willingness, her submission, it was intoxicating. I ordered her to get naked, and she obeyed without hesitation. I entered her slowly at first, but the pace quickly escalated. Faster and faster. Our bodies moved in unison, each thrust pushing us closer to the edge.
"No one has ever made me this happy,"
she gasped between moans. Her words spurred me on, and I manhandled her until she climaxed, her body shuddering with pleasure. But I wasn't finished. I took her again and again, until the first light of dawn crept into the room. By the end, her face was covered in cum. A look of utter satisfaction and submission etched on her features. She looked almost worthless in her willing surrender, but there was a glint of contentment in her eyes. And so, this became our routine. Night after night, we repeated our frenzied encounters, a cycle of lust and domination that seemed to have no end. I believed I had claimed her, that she was mine now, but the truth was far more sinister. I realized too late that I had become ensnared in her web once more. Her willingness, her submission, it was all a facade, a way to keep me under her control. Samantha was truly evil, a master manipulator who knew exactly how to use her body and her wiles to bend me to her will.